And hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Forbes Sports Money. I'm Bob Lorenz, joined as always by my co-host Michael Ozanian of Forbes Magazine. We're going to begin this show with the newest Formula One racing valuations. Now, when we always break apart valuations, we think of soccer as this global appeal. We think of Major League Baseball and the NFL with this U.S. appeal. How big is Formula One racing?
Overall revenue, $3.8 billion, Bob, and it truly is a global sport. You know, they have races all around the world.
All right, so when we talk about a team maybe to keep an eye on at this time, what team would that be?
Mercedes, they've clinched the F1 series this year. They're the #1 team for the first time, I think, since 2007. But if you're talking about the most valuable F1 team, there's Ferrari and there's nobody else. Ferrari is worth $1.35 billion, the only F1 team worth more than $1 billion because they have the most revenue by far.
So where's that revenue coming from?
Well, you know, this is where F1 gets a little tricky because you kind of got this formula for parsing out money, and a lot of it depends on where you finish. Then these teams all have their side deals. So if you're one of these sort of elite teams like a Ferrari, like a Red Bull, you get some extra money. And then on top of that, Ferrari also gets 5% of F1's operating income. So they clearly have an advantage when it comes to revenue.
And in terms of sponsorships, you're talking these teams can cut side deals and make potentially, like Ferrari, a ton of money.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the brand Ferrari, you just look at it this way. 3 sponsors, Philip Morris, Santander, and Shell, combined paid $200 million in sponsorship revenue to Ferrari alone. That's more than some teams get in total.
Okay, so that goes into the team's pocket. But you also talked about Ferrari getting this bonus and then 5% of Formula One's operating income. Why would they get that?
It's because teams do their own deals with Bernie Ecclestone. So, you know, these things are sort of grandfathered in over many years. And quite frankly, you know, if you look at McLaren, you look at Ferrari, you look at Mercedes, these teams are worth more to the series than some of the lower-level teams because of their brand. And, you know, quite frankly, that's why these teams generally race. They don't make money on the team level. They make it from selling cars.
But that almost sounds like it's a system of haves and have-nots. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly the bottom teams are struggling. 2 teams that race this year likely will not be around in 2015. At the race in Austin last month, there were some teams talking about unless the revenue distribution becomes fair, you know, they may boycott F1. But the top teams are the draw.
Okay, you've also talked about teams on average losing money. So if you're losing money in Formula One and you're not a Ferrari or a McLaren or something like that, why would you continue to stay in?
Yeah, if you're somebody like Red Bull, which is involved in so many things, I mean, they own a Major League Soccer team. They use it to promote other products, whether it be their drink, their soccer team, and so forth. So it's really a branding endeavor. And I think what F1 is struggling with is what can they do about sort of this archaic payment system that's developed over decades where, you know, you have $2 billion in revenue from the Formula One series that gets parsed out. I'd say maybe $1.3 billion in operating income from F1. Of that $1.3 billion, 60% of that goes to the teams.
Right.
And then the teams try to raise money on their own, and everybody's cutting these deals with Bernie Ecclestone on the side. So, you know, it really creates that 2-tiered system.
So it sounds like the groups that own Formula One, Bernie Ecclestone is actually a minority partner, but these firms that own it are doing okay in terms of cash flow. But there's also been talk of an IPO that they would go public. If they're already doing okay, why would they go ahead and do that?
No, they've been paying themselves some huge dividends. CVC, which is the largest single owner, there are many owners, Bernie Ecclestone and a trust, they also own a sizable stake. $460 million in operating income in 2013. But on top of that, they've paid themselves $3.5 billion in dividends since 2007. And they've borrowed a lot of money to do that. They now have $4.1 billion of debt attached to Formula One. And Moody's, the rating agency, rates this debt as junk. So I think that may be getting in the way a little bit of an initial public offering of Formula One, which, you know, as you mentioned, they've been talking about doing for several years now.
Well, it doesn't sound like they're hurting right now, though, the way business is being done.
Not for cash, not at all. The owners are making a lot of money.